Well, let's start the lesson. And at the beginning of the lesson, I briefly consider what we discussed about with other students on previous lessons. We discussed about dynamic memory, and maybe the most important application of the dynamic memory is the way how we can create an array of variable size. The array size of which can be changed during program execution. When we create an array on a usual way, like int m and size in brackets. In this case, this size can be only a constant. I cannot create an array of the size that is computed or the size that is input from the keyboard when the program is running. This size must be declared as a constant. Const int size. But we consider in some previous lessons that the name of the array can be considered as a pointer to the first element. And from another point of view, the pointer can be considered as a name of the array. The pointer can be considered as a name of the array. And using this idea, we can allocate a memory and release a memory in the course of program execution. To do it, we use the operation new to allocate a memory and delete to release this memory. The general form of new is written here. To apply new, we should specify the type of the array, the size of the array, and we should declare a pointer of the same type with some identifier that is written here as ID, and after that we can use ID as a name of the array of the corresponding type with these size elements. This size can be a variable, like on this example. I input the value of the array from the keyboard, and after that declare, not declare, but allocate the memory for the array, and delete it when the memory becomes unnecessary. The same I can show you in Visual Studio. How to work with array of variable size. First, we should declare a pointer. Now A is a pointer, and initial value for the pointer usually is null. Null is a special constant that actually equals to 0. After that, I can input the value of the variable size from the keyboard and allocate the memory. And when the memory is allocated, I can work with array with the name A as usual, using brackets, using indexes, and so on. So in this program, I assign their values from 0 to size -1, and after that print these values to the screen. And when the array becomes unnecessary, these are the memory must be deleted. Well, I should input the size, for example 5, and we see 5 elements that are assigned to this array. If I run this program again, I can input another size, and we see another values. Well, on the previous lesson, I show the some features of this. For example, suppose I forget to allocate the memory. In this case, the program still be correct from the point of view of compiler. Here you may see that there are no errors. Compiler outputs that their build is succeeded. But if I try to run, we see that this program closed with some bad return code. Because I try to get access to the memory that I don't allocate. This is the first problem. Another problems can be, for example, as far as this size is an integer, I can even, oh, okay, if it's constant, it will be wrong, but I can, for example, assign here -4 and use here size. Compiler doesn't check the size of the array. I assign size -4 and compiler tells me it's okay. But if I try to run this program, I see a mistake. So be careful with this. You should control the sizes of the arrays manually. So all their values must be controlled by programmer. Well, I briefly consider the topics that we discussed on previous lesson. Do you have any questions about it? I always say that there are two options when students don't have questions. First, that it's all clear and all the students understand. And the second option, that nobody don't understand nothing. And I don't know what's the situation with you. Do you understand?
Oh, yes,
and
sir.
Yes, and you don't have a questions. Okay. Well, if you understood all these things, all these features, let's discuss about the next very important feature, functions. So on this lesson, let's start to consider functions. And first, let's consider some general information about the functions. Functions are used for simplification of your program in two basic cases. So imagine the case when you write a program and in several parts of your program you should use the same algorithm. In several parts of your program you should write the same lines of code. In this case, instead of repetition of this group of statements several times, we can write these statements only once before your program, and we can organize these statements in a special way that calls a function. And this operation, writing the same, writing several codes before the main program, is called description of the function. And further, in the places where statements must be executed, we realize some special operation that called function call, which is significantly shorter than their full statements. Of course, you already use functions. For example, let me modify this program and let me write the same this loop, for example, from 1 to 4, and here let's use a mathematical function to compute the value of sinus. Okay. Here you see on the screen the values of sinus. But here I don't define completely what is sinus, how to compute sinus. I just call this function. I call this function and I write the parameter, the argument of this function. And the mathematical functions are a very good example of the functions, because the idea of mathematical function is very close to the idea of function in C language. How you can define function in mathematics? How do you think? What is a function? When you study, for example, algebra or mathematical analysis, do you write some functions?
Yes.
Yes. How you can define what is a function? In some general way. Of course, I'm not asking you about the strict definition, but in your opinion, what is a function?
It's kind of like the relationship between like variables, I guess.
Right. Yes. In some general words, the function is a rule, it's a relationship between input and output. So how we can define sinus? Do you know what is a sinus? Sinus, the function. Sinus 0, what is the value? 0. Sinus 0 equals to 0. Sinus pi?
Rectangle. Sin pi.
Pi.
Minus sin
Pi.
pi.
45. Sinus always is smaller than 1. Do you remember? Sinus is always smaller than
It's 1.
smaller than 1.
It's 0.8 minus 0. Square root.
It's 0 again. Sinus pi is 0 again. Okay, well, in mathematics, we consider function as some rule, some correspondence between input and output. So the function has, in mathematics, one parameter, one argument, x, and the output is y, or f of x. And in programming, this mathematical function is exactly the same. So I can write a sinus, and I can put a parameter here. For example, I. Yeah? Or I can use here, let me write math point h and define use defines and after that I can use the constant m pi for number pi. Now I times pi. We see some values that is very close to 0 because pi, sinus pi is close to 0. Well, it's just an example. It's example that we can, instead of reading the definition how to compute sinus, I just call the function sinus. Well, and the second way how functions helps us to simplify the program development is written here. in your case, your first programs are rather small, just 10, 20, maybe 30 lines of code. It's a very small program, and this program you just see on the screen, and you can keep it in mind, and you can fix a mistake in this program very efficiently. But suppose that your program is very large, 100 or 1,000 lines of code. Nobody can keep in mind these 100 lines of code. And it's very hard to find a mistake when the program is very large. In this case, we can divide this very large program into several smaller parts and develop these parts separately. Each of these parts is small, and it's very simple to find all the mistakes, all the possible mistakes in this smaller part. But after that, these several smaller parts must be united in one large program. And in this way, there are several problems. First problem: how to divide the program into parts. Or more general question can be how to divide an algorithm into parts, because your program is not an abstract program. It's the program that solves some problem. It's a program that implements some algorithm. And this stage is carried out before writing the program and is called module analysis. And a separate part of the program is called module. And every program can be considered as a sub-program implementing a sub-algorithm of the general program, the general algorithm. And okay, suppose we carried out this module analysis, we divide the program into several modules, but how to assemble these programs that consist of several parts?
You assign the repetitive parts, the parts that are repeated, you could assign it to some kind of variable or something?
Yeah, I show your example. It's just a general information about the problem of using functions. I show you some examples, and I think you understand. And the question 3, how to provide the information exchange among these models. And for solving these problems, C language applies the tools of functions. Of course, not the functions are not a peculiarity of C. Any programming language contains such tool as functions. You can consider Python, Java, any language. Any language contains functions. Well, let's consider these tools in details. In general case, when the program contains several parts, several functions. One of these functions, one of these modules should be the main, and other modules must be subordinate to this main. And this main module is called main function or just main. And from this function, the program execution begins. Other modules are subordinate to main and is activated in the course of program execution. So in general case, the program structure can be looks like this. First, you write some preprocessor directives, then you write a function number A and the statements that belongs to the function A. Next, function B with corresponding statement, function C, and so on. The number of functions depends on your problem. It may be one function, two functions, 10 functions, and so on. But one of these functions must have the name main, and this function begins the program execution. So when we consider the program, when you write the program, this is the main function. And the program starts here from this line. Before main and after preprocessor directives, you can define another subordinate functions that will be called from the main one. And from this point of view, the function sinus is a subordinate function to main, the function that's subordinate to main. Three important features are connected with the concept of function in C language. First, description. Second, prototype, and a call of the function. Let's discuss about each of them. Description of the function. As far as this is a description describes the algorithm implemented by the function and internal data needed for this implementation. And the description of the function consists of so-called header and body. And the general form of the function description is written here. First, we should write the type of the result. This type corresponds to the type of the result which the function returns after its execution. Next, you should write the name of the function. The name of the function is just an identifier. Identifier that should be written according to the rules of creating identifiers in C language. Then, optional list of parameters. It's optional because some function doesn't require parameters, some function requires only one parameter, two parameters, and so on. So list of parameter is optional. and a body of function. The body of function is a block. Block starts from open brace and finished with closed brace after the header of the function, containing declarative and executive statements. Elements in square brackets are optional and may be omitted. Well, let's write some simple function according to this general description. The name of the function, or maybe I don't write the new function. I just consider this main function from this point of view. What is the type of the result for this main function? Is int. Yeah. What is the name of the function? Main. List of parameters is empty. No parameters. And this is the body of the function. Several lines of code between open and closed brace. And usually when the function is int, you should write a special statement return that returns the result. And if you write the main function, also if your program consists of only one function, this function must have predefined name, main. I cannot change this name. In this case, compiler outputs you a mistake. I cannot read it because it's a Russified computer and mistake is in English, some problems with encoder. But the meaning of this mistake, as I remember, compiler cannot find main. In every program, compiler try to find the function with the name main. But I delete it. Sorry, what? I show you an example right now.
So a function is basically like a whole program, right? Because that was you declared, and then you executed a body, and then you.
Yes, the function can be considered as a sub-program. The program that some small part of the program that starts from the name of the function and ends with this closed brace. And
okay.
The main function, the main is also can be considered as a function. Well, now function header. Let's first we discuss about this about header from theoretical point of view, and after that I show you the concrete example. The function header described the name of the function, the type of the result, and the list of parameters. And if the function returns no value, so we know that this function returns nothing. Special data type void is used as element of result type. So in this case, I write int, but if I know that this function returns nothing, I can write void. Well, now we are able to write a very simple function. Void. This keyword tells that this function returns nothing. Let's give the name simple function, simple func, no parameters, and this function does nothing. So now this function is correct from the point of view of compile. This function has name, simple func. This function has list of parameters. It's empty. This function has a type of the result, empty, void. And this function has a body. The body is also empty. But it's correct from the point of view of compiler. If I try to compile this program, compiler tells me, okay, it's okay, but this function does nothing. Well, if we are going to write here some statement, it may be, for example, output statement. Let's call, let's change the name. For example, this name I changed to hello, and here let's output our world from the function. Oh. Well, now I can say that the function hello outputs to the screen this line. But we never see this line on the screen because I need to call this function in the main. I need to write somewhere hello. For example, I can write it here. And now we see this line size times because I write hello inside loop. So this function still be very, very simple because this function doesn't have any parameters. This function returns void and it's just output something to the screen. Well, let's write a more complex function. To write more complex functions, we should pass some parameters to the function and computes the output somehow. For example, here you may see there are some examples of the function headers. And you see that the list of parameters in the function organized on the following way. You should write the type and identifier, and after that comma if you separate several parameters. After that, the type of the second parameter, the name of the second parameter, and so on. The parameters that is written in this header of the function are not real variables, not real information objects. They are used just for organization of exchange of the information between main function and subordinate function, or in general, the calling function and the called function. And these parameters can be considered just gates through which calling and called program communicates the data. And I can say, in other words, that these parameters just declares that here it should be a variable of some type, but it's not a declaration of the variable. And if the function has some result, this result should be returned from the function by means of special statement return. You should write return, it's a keyword, and an expression. And the type of the expression must be the same as the type of the function. The statement return provides immediate completion of the function and transmits to the call point the value of the function. This value is computed as the value of the expression and included in the further statement. Okay, let's consider some very simple function as example. For example, let's consider the function increment. What is the meaning of increment? Do you know this word?
It's like a consistent pattern.
Increase the value of the variable. Usually the word increment in programming is considered as in this sense, to increase the value of some number. Suppose that I pass here some integer number I, and I should return the integer number that is greater than I and equals I plus 1. In this case, I write return I plus 1. How this function works? It gets the integer number I and returns the value that is larger, I plus 1. Okay, let's output this value to the screens. I equals to I and I plus 1 and here I call the function inc I. Well, I call the function in inc from their main and pass the parameter I to this function. And of course, we see on the screen that, for example, I equals to 0, I plus 1 equals to 1. I can write here any statement that I want. For example, plus 10. In this case, we see I plus 10 on the screen. I can write here also a declarative statement, executive statement, any statement, any statement. Inside the function, I can write any statement that I can write in the main one. Well, is it clear? Yes.
I thought you said the void functions had to be empty. Didn't you say they have to be like? Didn't you say they had to be value as 0? The void.
So, void means the function doesn't return the result. It's not empty. I mean the function doesn't have a result. If I write here void, in this case, it will be a mistake because this word declares function doesn't have a result, but I try to return the result inside the function.
Oh, okay.
And of course, this function will be wrong. The type of this result must be the same as the type here. For example, I can write here pointer. Int with star means pointer, but I try to return int. The type of the result and the type of the variable that I try to return is not the same. And compiler outputs me a mistake.
Okay, got it.
Only if the type of the result and the type of the expression in the return statement is the same, the program will be correct. Okay, if it's clear, I ask you to solve a very simple problem. Please write the function that returns the maximum between two numbers. The function gets two numbers as the parameters, and the function returns the largest one. This is an example how to write this function. This function has one input parameter and one output parameters. If we are going to select the maximum, how many parameters must be?
Two
parameters, two input parameters and one output parameter. Inside the function, you should select the maximum and return this value as a result. Try to solve this problem, and I'll check your solutions. Function that selects the maximum between two numbers. This function just add 10 to the one number that I passed to the function.
So we declare two variables.
Yes.
To the two numbers.
Yes. Two variables as parameters. Two variables as parameters.
So the user will enter the two numbers.
You can enter these numbers from the keyboard. You just, for example, just declare these two numbers in the program. Anyway, for example, from the keyboard.
And we output some maximum.
Yes. The largest number. But this function, it just selects the maximum. You should enter the numbers in the main one and pass these two numbers into the subordinated function. Yes, you should write this if, but you should write this if here inside the function.
Just input the number.
Yeah, in the main function, you should input the numbers, and here you should select. You should select the maximum.
Sir, is this correct?
Let me check. No,
Oh, okay.
no. Well, I show your solution if you have some, just in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, I show you the solution.
Okay.
Maybe the best way is to write this problem first without the function, just in main, and after that try to move the part of the code that select the maximum from the main function into the subordinate one. No, it's wrong. See, the function must be declared outside of the main. Actually, before, between the header statements and the main. It's not exactly right, it's not very, but you are very close to the right solution. It's very good, but not exactly. Yes, try to declare here just I equals to 5, and for example, j equals to 4, e equals to 4. But don't forget to write semicolon after declaration. And after that, call the function and pass the parameters I and e. Yes, you can use scene, of course. You can use scene, you can use assignment, any way to assign values to the variables. Input statement, assignment operations. Well, if you, but not just the name of the function, like I call sinus. Just name of the function and name of the parameters. If I, if, and delete the first, delete if, this one. Well, after that, you can run it. No? Okay, you can return 0 and run your program, and you see on the screen the correct result. That maximum is 5. Yes. But we see the correct result. But you get the correct result on the wrong way. We see the correct result. Yes, there is another way, the correct way. I show you this way. Just in a few minutes. Okay, you try to write the all inside main. Okay. Okay, you try to write all inside main. Okay, and after that move through. Well, of course, this topic is rather new for you. Well, I don't expect that all of you will solve this task from the first time. That's why I give you this task just to understand your level, what you understand, what you not understand. Well, another solution. No, also wrong. Well, let's develop this program together. Right? I show you the screen now, and first, how to select the largest value between two values. Suppose I have two values, I and j, right? And
You could either assign them or you could read it from the console.
Later. I can assign, for example, 3 and 1. Well, and the main point here, that I introduce one more variable, m, and this variable, I declare it for the maximum, for the largest value between I and j. And now I can write if I greater than j, then m equals to I. Else m equals to j. This if selects between I and j, and it assigns the largest value to new variable m. And after that, I can move this if from the main function to subordinate function. Let's call this, this function, of course, I can give any name that I want. Inc, func, any name. But as far as I select the maximum, let's call this function max, right? And this function should get two parameters. The numbers between which I select the maximum, I and j. After that, I just move these lines to their function. What happens? Please look to this code. What happens? Visual Studio tells me that here is a mistake. Of course, this is a mistake. Of course, it's wrong because I and j is declared here as the parameters, and I use it here. But m is not declared. I should declare it. And I can use any variable. I can use any name that I want. I don't want to use m. Let me use here result, because this value is a result of this function. Result equals to I, result equals to j. And what I should do in the end of the function? What I should write? Return result.
Yes.
Return result. What happens if I equals to j? What happens? Look to this. If I equals to j, is it true? Please look to the board, not on your computer, because I show you. If I equals to j, is it true?
I mean, if I equals to j, then result will not have a value.
No. If I equals to j, I greater than j is
Oh no, it's false.
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 It's
Yes.
false.
Yes.
And if it's false,
The result will be J.
the
Oh,
result will be
yes,
j.
yes.
And as far as I equals to j, it doesn't matter. Result equals to I or result equals to j, it doesn't matter. The second branch of if will be carried out, and we obtain the correct result. And finally, we returns the result. The main mistake, because it's not a mistake, some minor mistake in your solution, that you output the result inside the function. Here I return the result. I return the result into the main function, and after that, in the main function, I can output it to the screen. I can use it in some other computational statements and so on. How to use this function? Very simple. I should call this function. I should call this function, so I should write the name of the function. The name of the function is max, and I should write the parameters. Please look to, if you type the name of the function, Visual Studio shows you the hint what parameters you should write here. Two integer variables I and j. I and j. And finally, let me max. Well, let's check. The max is 3, between 3 and 1, of course. But you see that the function max takes two parameters, two integer numbers. I can pass any numbers that I want. Here, I pass the numbers I and j. But I can pass I and 5. You see that the first parameter is a variable I, and the second parameter is an integer number. And the function max will select the maximum between I and 5, between first parameter and second parameter. Max is 5. I can write here both two parameters as a constants, 10 and 5. Well, I can use this function here. For example, I can write m equals to max 10, 5, and after that, output here the value of the variable m. I can write this function 10 times, 20 times with different parameters. Well, please look to this example. Look to this example. Write it on your computers, write it and store it to remember. Well, any questions?
Not really. I think I understand. It's just a different application.
Before this task, you also don't have equations, but I don't see the correct results too. No questions and no results.
It's getting to be funny. This way, Max
This line? 28. Okay. The line 28, I call the function max. I pass to the function two parameters, I and j, and the result that the function max returns, I assign to the variable m. And after that, I can use m in any way that I want. Also, I can use the function max inside a complex expression like this. For example, I can here plus 10. I can write here any complex expression. Even I can use a function max several times like this. Max plus 10 max plus max. I use one function several times. I don't know, is it true or not? Of course, it's true. Well, because 3 plus 30 plus 3, 36. But in this example, in one line, I use a max several times. This is the main, the main feature of the function. I write these lines. I write these lines only once, but I can call it a lot of times.
Can you do the same for loop, or only?
Sure, of course. You can we can move to the function any operations, loops, ifs, and so on. Next lesson, I will show you examples how to pass their arrays to the function and get the result from the function.
We can't use the function because sometimes after that we delete this function, or we can delete function, like temporary function.
Temporary?
Yes, like this.
Not temporary. If you declare the function,
And
after that, in this program, you can use this function at any part that is written below.
if I want to delete this function,
If you want to delete, just delete it. Just delete. But if you delete it, of course, any place when you call this function becomes not working, of course. Functions is extremely important concept that is used in C++. Questions? No. Well, and also I can say that I on the next slide there is a solution in this presentation, but I cannot put here all of the program, just their main function. Well, I will send you the presentation. I will send you the video file with this lesson, so you can watch it again and again and again several times. Well, now if you don't have questions, let's finish our lesson. See you next week, next Thursday. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice week.